Welcome to Have History Will Travel. I am your host, the Wilder Historian, and today we are going to talk about a dark time in this nation's history. Let's travel back to World War I. The United States industrial and agricultural output soared to help supply the Allied powers with weapons, ammunition, and foodstuffs. The American people also mobilized in the form of troops, with millions of men being drafted and forming the American Expeditionary Force that would help the Allies fight against the Central Powers in Europe. For the first time since the Civil War, the United States instituted a national draft to fill these positions. Millions of men signed up for the selective service, and the draft boards began drawing numbers. When the guns fell silent on November 11, 1918, at 11 a.m., roughly 40 million casualties worldwide between military and civilian casualties, with a little over 100,000 deaths coming from the United States Armed Forces. Those who experienced World War I dealt with the hardships of trench warfare and the carnage from having to cross no man's land, or simply the terror in hearing artillery shells approaching their positions from great distances. In 1924, for their service, Congress apportioned them adjusted compensation certificates, or bonuses. That gave servicemen $1.25 for every day served overseas and $1 for every day served in the States. However, this payment would not be made until 1945. In October 1929, lack of confidence and a little stagnation in the stock market caused a panic as investors started selling off their stock and the stock market crashed. That, along with unregulated banking practices and the American agricultural industry oversaturating the market with wheat, corn, and cotton, created the worst economic depression in the United States history. With unemployment reaching new highs, farm goods bringing in less money, and depositors launching multiple runs on banks, making the financial establishments close their doors, Americans were in dire straits. World War I veterans were no exception. They were looking forward to their bonuses coming in 1945, but with the Great Depression threatening their families' lives, they decided to march on Washington D.C. and demand their bonus pay early. Estimates vary, but close to 20,000 veterans converged on the Capitol, and many camped out on the Capitol grounds, building shanty towns or tent cities so they could lobby Congress to give them their bonuses early, hoping to relieve some of the hardships brought on by the Depression. After an unsuccessful vote in the Senate for the bonus bill, Attorney General Mitchell ordered the veterans evicted from the Capitol and called on the Washington police force to enforce the declaration. A riot occurred and shots rang out, leaving 2 veterans dead. President Herbert Hoover, hearing about the riot, called in the Army under Douglas MacArthur to cast out the veterans. Cavalry, led by George S. Patton, and infantry and 6 tanks descended on the marchers at 4:45 that day and chased them out of the Capitol. They set fire to their camp. Hospitals were packed with the wounded. Future President Dwight D. Eisenhower later wrote, "The whole scene was pitiful. The veterans were ragged, ill-fed, and felt themselves badly abused. To suddenly see the whole encampment going up in flames just added to the pity." When Franklin D. Roosevelt became president, he dealt with the bonus army that were still camped on the Capitol differently. He provided them with food and shelter. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt went and visited them. She sat by the campfires and heard their war stories, and she shared stories about how she watched soldiers march off to war. In 1936, Congress would pass the bonus bill, and the soldiers would get their bonuses early. I hope you enjoyed this video. I think it is an incredibly interesting story that does not get talked about much, and I wanted to hopefully bring it to the forefront of people's minds when they think about the Great Depression. Thank you and have a nice day.